Let's compare the 2024 Samsung S90D OLED TV with the best OLED TVs of 2023, Samsung S95C, LG G3, and the Sony A95L. And after all of our comparisons, we'll discuss which Samsung OLED TV you should buy in 2024.
All right, let's do this. Firmware and settings. So we'll start with the S95C. So I'll be out of the picture real quick as I go over the various TVs. Let me see. We'll start with S90C since that's what y'all are here for. We'll be in filmmaker mode, and just so you see, for all I know, maybe they updated the software. I'm at version 1059. Today's video is brought to you by WhoKeys. Trying to build a PC on a budget but don't know where to buy your Windows software cheaply? WhoKeys to the rescue. Use my coupon code SF20 and immediate discount with a free upgrade to Windows 11. At the bottom of this order where it says code CARD, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from WhoKeys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can buy Windows 11 Pro or Office 2019 Pro with my discount code SF20. Yes, I've been using WhoKeys for the last several years on my own PC builds, and it just works. Filmmaker mode. Brightness 50, contrast, it was default at 45 when I got it out of the box, so I'll leave it at default because many people have it default. They just go to filmmaker mode, so I won't play with that. Let's see, everything else is off, picture clarity off, contrast enhancer off, warm 2, that's the most color accurate. Temperature, color booster is off, peak brightness is on high for SDR. And I left shadow detail at 0. We will play with this when we look. If we see that maybe there's a bit of crushing or not, we'll play with shadow detail and see what happens to the image. Now remember, this is out of the box. It's got less than 100 hours on it, and it is not calibrated. On the other hand, this beautiful 77-inch TV is calibrated. So let's check those settings. Make sure I have the latest update. My current software version is 1310. Make it easier for you guys to read. There you go, that's a little bit better. And we'll go to settings, filmmaker mode, brightness 50, contrast 50. This is all being calibrated, so I'm going to leave the settings as they are. And shadow detail 0. Now, I'll do 1 because this gives me the most accurate shadow detail for the S95C. We'll see how the S90D compares to the S95C. And the Sony, I just updated the Sony yesterday. So here's the Sony, right? Professional mode, of course. Brightness, max, 90 contrast, black level 50, that's default. Peak luminance is on high. Color is on expert 1, and I played with this. Thank you, Classy. He came by, well, he didn't come by here, but he gave me a call and gave me more accurate settings, and so the Sony looks pretty good. Actually, very similar to the calibrated G3. Now, the A95L is not calibrated, but the G3 is. All right, filmmaker mode, and this morning, it just updated the firmware, so advanced settings. And again, the G3 is calibrated, so max brightness, everything else is off. Dynamic tone mapping, dynamic contrast is off. Peak brightness will be on for HDR, so I'll just put that on now. Okay. Let's put this 15% window so you guys can see what uniformity looks like. This is the uniformity. I'm going to turn up the exposure so you'll see. We'll play with the exposure throughout this video, right? So this is on maximum exposure for my camera. And as you can see, if it's overexposed, not much to see there. But as you take the exposure down, you'll probably see a little bit of that dirty screen effect, right? And so this is the complaint with the WOLED. It is a panel lottery. Some people will get cleaner than others. Relatively speaking, mine is clean. So yeah, I know, is that terrible? All right, so let's take it out of there. I think we are good to go to the next topic here. And as you can see, now that we are here in normal content, you can't see the dirty screen effect, right? And this is something that Brian mentioned that I think is important, Brian S. And not to be confused with my co-host, Brian, none of the screens looked bad to me, just slightly different tones of gray. And that's the thing, the dirty screen isn't terrible, right? It's actually pretty good for a WOLED. Thanks for that. Okay, so now we're gonna look at shadow details or crushing. And with that, we'll go to this pattern. We'll be looking at this area over here, right? The darkest areas, and compare where, if any, there's black crushing, and relatively speaking. So the S95C and the G3 are calibrated. The Sony is not, and the S90C is not. So if I turn up the exposure, hyper expose this, all right, boom. So what you see is the S90C and the S95C are nearly identical with the G3 and the Sony. So right here, the black levels, these black levels, even by eye, I can tell there's no crushing if I'm just using the pattern, right? So relatively speaking, the Sony is slightly, I would need a meter, but the Sony is slightly more, I don't want to say lifted because it is, well, maybe it is lifted, right? Because it is not calibrated, but I think it's so close that I'd say all four TVs are indistinguishable unless you put it side by side. They're that close. So my S90C, at least on this pattern, does not appear to be crushing, but we'll try different colors. That's white. Oh, what happens if we go to red? Red looks good, right? If you look at S95C, which is calibrated, and I had a pretty good panel, and the S90C, very similar, and as well as the G3 and the Sony, red looks good, green looks pretty good, blue, oh, that's very clear. So there may be a touch on the S90D, might be, if you look at that one step, just above black and blue. It's a little bit darker than the S95C, but very similar to the Sony and similar to the G3. So that's something to think about. I mean, if you can call that crushing, sure, but this is like hyper exposed. But yes, arguably speaking, the S90D slightly darker right here, right? So here on the S95C is a bit more visible than right here on the S90D. So if you take that one step up, yeah, it's slightly crushed. I mean, I wouldn't return it based on that. And again, this is hyper exposed, so you guys can see the crushing. This is cyan. That looks pretty good there. Magenta, everyone loves magenta. S90 is very close. I'm not to complain. And yellow's great too. Again, yellow, maybe a touch, not bad. This is not something that I would return it for. If you compare the G3 in the yellow and the Sony and G3 and Samsung are very similar. You need to go to the dynamic range low patterns to make sure it's in HDR. Alrighty, so let's do that. We are at dynamic range low. Okay. So I've turned up my exposure, and here we are, dynamic range low. Let me look up close. So on the Sony, I can see it flashing up to 65. On the G3, it stops at 68, so there's a bit of crushing from 67, 66, and 65. And here, it goes down to 66 and 65. 65 is a hard one to see, but definitely it goes down to 66. On the S95, yes, 65 is definitely more clear. So the S95C goes down to 65 solid. Thank you, SD, for that reminder. See, this is why it takes a village, my friends. Good reminder. So let's do that. Let's take it off. Let's take it down one. S95C again. So we're in filmmaker mode, brightness, contrast, all at 50. And we'll go down shadow detail. Oh, darn it. There we go. Shadow detail. Down, 0. Okay. There we go. Okay. I think we're done with this. I don't want to spend too much time on this pattern because you guys want content, right? Again, out of the box, S90D, not calibrated, but the other two of them are S95C, G3 are calibrated, and the Sony A95L is not calibrated. So just going through the images real quick, they actually all look pretty good. Nothing stands out as, oh, the colors are off. I mean, to my eyes, look great. I'm hoping you're seeing what I see, which is the skin tones are definitely acceptable. This is a great one because this model, she has very multiple colors in her skin tone, right? It's a light tan, and within that, if anything is off, you'll see the differences right away. And it's crazy that the Sony and the S90C look so similar to the calibrated G3 and S95C. So as far as I'm concerned, this one looks pretty good. This is a good question, Lisa. I'm going to hit this one. Which primary color could a TV be without and would bother you the least? So first of all, it's not green. If green is off, too much green and all these skin tones destroyed. Red could be a little bit off and it'll just be warm if it's oversaturated, and that actually is acceptable to many people, and that's why Sony sometimes pushes a little bit warm. As you can see, and this is why I recommend the G3 for sports. The G3 is the brightest TV here. However, the S90D is right there, but okay, it's not as bright as the Sony or the S95C. That's just straight up, right? The minute we switched the source, this is probably as bright as it's going to get. The question is, can the Sony hold on to its brightness? Because it starts off pretty strong. Can the S95C hold on to its brightness? And will the S90D get even dimmer? As you can see, the S90D is starting to dim a little bit more than when it started. And I got a reminder from KG to make sure I have logo dimming off on the S90D. Does that mean I have to do sports again if I don't have logo dimming off? Hey, guess what? We get to do sports again. Oh, all right. Okay, sports dimming. So let's see if the S90D is gonna dim over time. Oh. All right, let's do this. I think the S90D is not dimming aggressively at all, actually, with the logo off. Yeah, I think the S90D motion looks fine. I wouldn't exchange it because of the motion, that's for sure. I'm sure if we put a special sensor / meter on it, you guys notice differences, but to the human eye, I think it's fine. I'm looking at the puck, and there's no artifacts around the puck. The puck looks very clean on all the TVs. Wow, that's really bright. It's amazing. Oh, it's dynamic mode. But I can see why you guys enjoy watching in dynamic mode. I was tempted to go, wow, this is crazy awesome, right? Oh, the disappointment of it all. We are at 10,000 nits. So tone mapping at 10,000 nits is unrealistic. There is no content at 10,000 nits. So if you see issues with tone mapping, we're going to go down to 2,000 nit content, which I think is more realistic. I just want to see at its limit what the TVs can do. Okay? So. So far, they all look very similar. Like right here is interesting. The tone mapping on the Sony is a little bit clipped. Hard to see. Just a touch. Right here in the top right-hand corner. Put on my magic gloves here. So the detail in the clouds here is not as much detail as on the Samsung, on the two Samsungs, and even on the LG, and that's all tone mapping. So we all know that Sony does not tone map very well above 2000 nits, and to be fair, good luck finding contents at 2000 nits anytime soon. Everyone's favorite, white horses, and this is where you really see any loss of detail, right? If there's any. So count the blades of grass. So obviously the Sony has the least number of blades of grass. LG has a few more, arguably. And I think the S95C has more than the S90C. Oh, wow. I mean, maybe because it's bigger? It looks like it's better resolved than the S95C. G3 isn't bad, actually. But the S95C definitely has the most blades of grass in the scene. Let's see if you guys can see that. Yeah, that's basically what I see. But again, don't buy a TV on 10,000 nit content. I just wanted to push the limits of their ability to tone map. We'll go to some dark scenes so we can see some black crushing at 10,000 nits. This one looks pretty good. It's not dark enough though to test black crushing. We'll get to the swamp, and that's a great one for the black crushing near black. Yeah, right here you can see the Sony is like just just blew that out, right? Let me lower my exposure so you guys can see that. It's kind of funny. I can't even lower it enough. All right. Okay, well, going fast forward real quick here. Oh, here we go. We're getting closer to near blacks. Yeah, all the TVs really do well in specular highlights because they're OLED. And these are the scenes where if you're afraid of uniformity issues, it would pop up, right? Slightly mid light scenes. On the G3, it doesn't look bad. I cannot see the uniformity issues that you normally see in a gray. Flying forward, real quick. Yeah. There we go. This is a great one for any black crushing, if there is any. So let's turn up the exposure. And as you can see, on the S90D, very similar near black as the other three TVs. So this scene where you have blacks on the bottom, if there's crushing, this is where they struggle, right? Okay, so this is what actually I was going to show you. This is important, and this is the difference between WOLED and qd-oled. This is the scene that WOLED struggles with. If you notice, there is color here, and on the WOLED, it's too bright, it's mostly white. So this is why people get WOLED, right? So this is pretty bright. This is bright, but all bleached out. There's no color here. The color is preserved in all the qd-oleds. So there are certain color spaces where if it's too bright, WOLED simply cannot show it. And that's one example of that. So we're going down to 2000 nit content here. And I know you guys don't watch Spears and Muscle for fun. We just use it as a challenge for all the TVs. I just wanted to show you guys how the Sony looks better with 2000 nit 2000 nit content on the white horses scene. But you guys will not notice these differences in most content because they're almost all at 1000 nits or less, which is all four TVs are capable of doing very well. Okay, let's stop right here. So remember the clouds kind of clipped out? So the Sony, it's all back. Let me turn down exposure a little bit. There we go. Wow, even then my exposure is not low enough. This thing is so bright. Okay, well, you have to take my word for it. It's all there. There's very little clipping. If anything, the G3, however, looks a little bit brighter, surprisingly. That's kind of cool. So the G3 really takes advantage of that brightness. This is 2000 nits, in case you guys are wondering. All right, let's go find the horses. Oh, oops. Is this it? Almost. Ah, there they are. Okay, so the details are all there. Ooh, wait, no, wrong. Sony, you're breaking my heart. Look how many leaves there are and grass coming out. Yeah, go down to 1000 nit. I'll give you a chance here, Sony. Okay, at 1000 nits, the grass is all there. I tell Sony all the time, you guys got to tone map bright content a little bit better. So yeah, so 1000 nits, Sony's fine. This is my OLED comparisons. Let's run it. Let's do it. And we'll pause interesting areas. So the first one is Alpha. This wonderful Oscar-winning movie. Almost, not quite. Okay, so this is super bright, right? This is sunrise and whatnot. And all 4 TVs actually do this very well. The S90D nails it here. Let's move on. Aquaman. Okay, so let's look at kind of like the whites and the skin tone on pause here. This is when if you have your white, if your white is off, let me turn up the exposure. If the white point's off a little bit, you're going to notice it here. And they all look spot on. 2 of them are calibrated. Reminder, S95C is calibrated, and the G3 is calibrated. Now, the G3 might look a little bit bluer because it's WOLED. WOLED, camera sensors being what they are, it's more sensitive to WOLED. So if it looks a little bit bluer, it's because more of my sensor eyeballing it, they look nearly indistinguishable. So the S90D out of the box, I'd say it's actually pretty good. And then we're going to go into skin tones in this next scene in Aquaman. There we go. Okay, so she has pale skin, as well, they both have pale skin. I'm going to turn up the exposure. So when it's off, if there's any green issues, oh, you're going to notice it in this one. Here we go. Okay. And that looked pretty good, right? So I like this because the red hair, the red lips, it's very saturated in this scene, but it's not so much, hey, I know what's accurate, but rather the differences, right? So all 4, I'd say, look pretty good because their skin tones, their lips, their hair looks very similar. So yay, S90D. Panel lottery, again, it's not to say you will get that same level of, oops, we're going to repeat it one more time. You're not going to get, since it's panel lottery, everyone may have a different experience. I just happen to get a really good one, actually. Okay, so, right, here we go. All right, now specular highlights. Let's see, does one gold shimmer better than the other? They all look similarly bright, so in this scene, they all do well. No TV, so you wouldn't choose a TV. So when people say, oh, I want to get this because it's brighter, not bright. Aquaman is a bright movie, and yet G3, A95L, Samsung S95C, and S90C, nearly identical. Specular highlights are the same. So when you're watching movies, I normally tell people, get the cheaper equivalent performing TV than upgrading to the S95C if all you watch are just regular movies, because Spears and Muscle is one thing, but Aquaman, come on, right? They all look similar. Save money, get the S90C, right? So that's why I want to use real content for you guys. All right, let's go on the next one. Mad Max, we all love this. I'm going to try and pause here and there where I can, because this one's a good one. No, I don't want that one. Is this a good one to stop? Okay, I'll stop in this one. This is actually a very good one to stop. Okay, so I like this scene a lot, actually. If you look at the brightest part of that fire, and you guys know, come on, this is fast action. You guys are not going to notice this, but I have to call it out just because if you're paying that much, you want to know why you're getting a QD-OLED. So this is a bright scene right here on the LG. It's clipped, the colors are clipped. You have a little bit of yellow, but there's a lot of white. On the Sony, it's equally bright, but there's a lot of subtlety. Oranges, shades of orange, shades of red, and that little speck right there actually has a little bit of red in it. Here, there's less red, and Samsung nails it as well because it's QD-OLED, not because it's Samsung or Sony, and that's the separation. So I think you can see it on YouTube, right? Not a big deal because look how fast this scene is going. I mean, are you really going to catch that, right? I mean, it's like boom, boom, boom. Same thing, right? That bright yellow. There's a bit more yellow in the other two. And, yep, right here, right? There's a little bit more red. But again, it's like fast moving. You're enjoying the moment. You're not going to stop and go, look, guys, I got QD-OLED. I have a little bit more red in my QD than the next guy, right? So this is such a good scene for that. So I'll let it run through this time without pausing. And tell me if you notice this difference. I mean, does it make a big deal that the LG G3 slightly doesn't have that yellow? And as far as the experience, right, it's phenomenal on all these TVs. Now, I did underexpose it a little bit so that you can see the detail, but I'm going to expose it to near what you're going to get when watching it. So let's see. It's going to play it again. There we go. Like, could you tell the difference between QD-OLED and WOLED in full 24p? Nope. All look great. All right, next one. Now this one is the white scene where if you have dirty screen effect, it's going to show, right? So Matrix, that white room. Let me pause here and get my exposure right. Okay, here we go. Okay, so you guys remembered how the G3 had slightly banding, vertical banding? You don't really see it here. So I took the exposure down, and if there's, now I do see a slight magenta tint, but that's a WOLED thing. Otherwise, it's pretty clean. So on the left-hand side, I see a slight magenta, but it's very slight, and I know what I'm looking for. The sensor on my camera does not pick up the magenta. So, but you can tell the WOLED, right, has that slight cooler look. That's just sensor sensitivity. So, looks pretty good. And they're holding the brightness, because this scene is a very bright scene, and none of the TVs are dimming as this scene plays. So it's pretty good. Now, this is going to be the near black shadow detail we talked about. All right, let me pause here. Let me turn up the exposure. Okay, this scene. This is a dark scene, period. And I'll stop right there. Okay, so all four TVs are showing very similar shadow detail. And this is one part where I'm going to pause right there. Okay. It has a lot of subtle shadow detail, perfect blacks, everything right. And they all look very similar. I cannot say one is more crushed than the other. So in the fast-moving action scenes like this, the S90D looks pretty good, as well as the other two TVs. 3 TVs. It's a dark scene. Pause there. Now, arguably, in the back wall, the G3, a little bit darker, and I think this is going to be a problem in 1917. So I'm going to point out where the G3 is a touch darker. And I know I'm being nitpicky, but come on, you guys are spending good money, right? You guys want to know, oh, what am I missing out on, right? So right here on the G3, slightly darker than on the other three. And this will become a problem in 1917. But there is a fix for that. If you have the G3, then you're going to have to put on dynamic tone mapping in filmmaker mode, which will help. And on 1917, it's more obvious. We'll just go straight there. Okay, we're going to run it through without dynamic tone mapping so you can see on the G3. Even though it's supposed to be about, okay, I'll just stop right here. So as you can see, there's no detail on the G3, right? I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, what happened here? So this is the complaint I had, and even though mine is calibrated, Sammy could not fix that, ultimately. And it's a panel lottery, I lost it. So let me do a quick fix so you guys can see what you could do to offset that. So here we go. Oop, wrong one. There we go, okay. Let me turn on the exposure. You can see the setting changes I'm going to make for you guys. Okay. All right, so filmmaker mode. We're going to go advanced settings. Brightness. So dynamic tone mapping on. And then I do expression enhancer on brightness. I mean, not accurate, but guess what? It brings some of that detail back, right? So now, with those improvements, let me turn up the exposure. Like, what? Everything's dark. What happened? Okay, there we go. Let's play this through. So it's a little bit better. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than what it was before. So unfortunately, when you do that, though, everything's a little bit brighter. The specular highlights are a touch brighter on the G3, but at least you see the shadow detail. But look at the S90D, though. It is identical to the 95C. All right, wait. Okay, I just can't wait. I just have to put this one up. Jesse, thank you for that comment. FOMO, using a fan to blow in the TVs gives the S95C and other TVs with inadequate cooling an unfair advantage. We need to see poorly designed TVs crash and black out. You mean ratings? That's what ratings is for, right? Because you guys are not watching 4 TVs at the same time. But excellent comment. I know what you're saying. But ultimately, when you have one TV, it's not going to be an issue. I have 4 TVs against the wall. And the last thing I want is to misrepresent what you would get. But you're right, you know, if you got 4 TVs, maybe you should get the G3 or G4 with a more effective heatsink, right? So with all this testing, which TV is the best for watching movies in your opinion? They all are. Now, out of the box. So once calibrated, if you notice, they all look nearly identical. I feel like the Samsung gave me more accuracy, if that's important to you. But the Sony is more satisfying because I do like the XR clear. Now, I didn't do low bitrate testing just because I didn't have it set up. I really need to find the right low bitrate content where the Sony shines, like YouTube TV. Now, I have YouTube, but I didn't get my YouTube TV set up for the right motion content. But ultimately, the Sony A95L is what I would get for myself, because I do like what XR Clear does. However, I'm very particular. If it was for my parents, S89C, S90C all day long. And S90D, wait for it to drop in price. S95C, slightly better, but you know, for value, S90C, S89C. In this case right here, I like the size of the 77-inch S95C. So size trumps all. If anything, the price of the S95C is like 77-inch over $3,000. Get the 83-inch S90C for $2,600 at samsung.com if you're an offer member, because the size impact, I think, really has an effect on your viewing pleasure. The subtle differences between these TVs at the same size, it doesn't move the needle enough. I mean, you guys saw it, right? I mean, they're so similar. Even the G3, when we looked at the Mad Max scenes where qd-oled slightly unsaturated in the brightest action scenes, you know, I wouldn't choose a TV based on that. but sports content, the G3 was clearly slightly brighter than the rest, but not so bright that, hey, let's get the G3. So at the end of the day, buy based on quality of life. Do you like Google TV? Do you like Tizen? Like if you notice when I changed the settings on the Tizen, boom, boom, my settings were done. Sony and LG, that wand, man, that remote, you got to go through the process. It's not quick, right? You got to enjoy putting that remote around. And on the Sony, it's Google TV. You either like it or you don't. So, or the audio. I can tell you right now, we're not testing audio today, but the A95L has the best audio of this entire group. Doesn't say much. It's just TV audio. But if you don't plan to buy a soundbar, A95L has the best audio of all four of them. The worst audio is the G3, just very anemic. And 95C is fine, not loud enough for a 77-inch TV. And I haven't even tested the audio on the 90D, but I know you guys don't buy TVs based on audio, but it's quality of life. So overall, I would choose the A95L for those things. Stop the FOMO. Mind testing the low color desaturation on the S90D? Maybe the arrival or the illusionist scene. I do have the illusionist scene. And we're almost there. There we go. Let's just stop right here. The red desaturation on the A95L is slightly worse. So it may be better than the A95K, but the G3, the 95C, the 90D nails it. And in SDR, we're not talking BT 2020. This is just, everything is within the color space, Rec 709. And so it's just basic red, nothing special. If you notice, and I'll point it out, what I'm looking at so you guys can see. So the edge of this cloak right here, right? This is dark gray. I'm seeing dark gray. On the LG, red throughout, dark light red, but you see red. It fills it up. On the Samsung, similarly, you see red, and the 90D, you see red. Whereas here, it's mostly dark gray with very little red. That's a desaturation of the red. I did not test this, but the S90D has this, well, let me see. So I'm just showing you the settings, right? The S90D has this color booster. So let's see what it does. So color booster, if that's a reason to pay an extra $1,000, but you know what? You never know. All right, so let's find something bright and colorful. There we go. All right, let's see what color booster does. So color booster is off on the S90D. Color booster, low, high. It seems to make, it doesn't do much. Color booster, definitely not a reason to get the S90D for the color booster. So I have color booster on high now. I have to remember to take this off later. And it looks, let me move my head over here real quick. Yeah, didn't do anything. So definitely not a reason to get the S90D. As far as just overall image quality, unrelated to upscaling of low bitrate content, and even then, you guys saw the YouTube Sports, it looked identical to their TVs. It wasn't any better than the 95C for sure. So I have to say that the 90C, get it over the 90D. Now, the S85C, so this is another thing. S85C was not launched this past week. There is a question as to whether it will be launched at all. I mean, will there be an 85C in the USA? There's no confirmation. And so the 85C may or may not be launched. If it is, it would be WOLED. And the WOLED 85C will not be as bright as the 90D or the 90C. So the S85C will be a step down if it doesn't have MLA. If it does have MLA, it'll be very similar to the G3, right? A little bit brighter. So I don't think it will, because it makes no sense to give it MLA. It would not cover the value OLED. If there is an S85C, it would definitely be less bright than the S90D. What you need to do is get the S90C if you're buying a TV right now. Don't overpay. But if you wait until Black Friday, the 90C will be gone. So someone was it Cass, right? Steve Cass. Is this going to be another hype video? It's definitely not hype. I mean, I'm hyping the 89C and 90C right now. I really think those are phenomenal, given what we saw here.
From the beginning.
Hit it, boys.